Hey folks, in this video we're going to be discussing cell references, and our examples are going to be related to using them within Google Sheets query function. This is taking one step closer to a practical environment where you could build a destination for yourself or collaborators to go and explore data based on segmentation specific to their individual needs. It will create a resource or destination that will start to provide people data feedback about specific things that they're interested in. This video is building off of our data types series, where we used different segmentation with a query statement, which you're seeing in front of us here, where within our where statement, we provided some specifications that we wanted to get out of our query results, such as country distinction, a inventory threshold, and a time period threshold that enabled us to get this unique set of data in here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss how to use cell references, deconstruct them, and we're going to demonstrate how we can use this design in order to construct environments for people to use in perpetuity. So to refresh, what we did in here was we leveraged a set of data in Sheet 1 that has quite a bit of information relating to country names and then people names and then time series data and values relative to them. In our example tab, we set in these parameters where we specified a country and then anything with a particular inventory amount and then anything in between two dates that we would want to be looking at. Now, the challenge with this is that if you wanted to say you wanted to make an adjustment to this, right? So you give somebody this workbook and they want to know how the United States performed. They would have to go into the query and then they would have to understand the syntax in here in order for them to say like, oh, it says Canada there. I'm going to type in the United States. I think that's an unrealistic expectation to make of your potential collaborators, especially if they're non-technical. I work with some technical people and I wouldn't even expect them to do something like this. So typically when I provide them an environment, I'll create what I refer to as slicers or drop-down menus that enable them to adjust the query without really knowing that they're adjusting the query. And the way that I do that is by using a cell reference. So a cell reference is something that you've probably done several times. You've probably done it in VLOOKUP, where we've done that in videos. If you've checked out any of my other videos, where you'll write a value in a cell, and then you will point to it using equal sign. So right now in J1, we are using a cell reference, right? We're referencing cell H1 in order to get a value to populate in J1. So you'll notice over here when I type in a value in H1, it's not doing anything for our query statement. We're going to change that. And the way that we're going to change that is by going into the query statement. And what I'm going to do real quick is just kind of clear out all this other stuff in here, and then we'll build up as we go along. So the value in column A is a string. And a string requires single quotes to be wrapped around it. When we use a cell reference, we need to maintain that syntax, meaning we need to have the value that we want to query wrapped in single quotes. So what I'm going to do is delete United States, and then I'm going to use a double quote, an ampersand, another ampersand, and a double quote. This is how you reference a cell within a string. This is going to be the formatting for it, and then all you have to put between these two ampersands is the cell that you want to reference. In this instance, our cell is in the example tab in cell H1. So I'm going to type in H1, and now you can see H1 is being highlighted with a purple tint, and you'll notice that H1 within the query statement is also a purple tint. So when I hit enter, we'll now see that these values have changed and we are filtering by Canada. And then if we wanted to change it to UK, we would just have to type in UK. And then if we wanted to change it to United States, we could change it to the United States. So what we're doing in here is we have now created an external way for individuals to explore this data using a cell reference. Now, in the event that you were using a non-string value, such as a number, an integer, a float value, you would not need to have these single quotes in there. So for example, if we want to work with our inventory threshold, where we specify including anything with a minimum value in the inventory column, we would reference column D because that's where it exists. And in this case, we want to look at anything is greater than or equal to 25. And you'll see that we didn't put single quotes around it, right? So when we hit enter, you'll see that our results changed, right? When we hit Command Z, you can see we were at 288 instances. And then when we add in that threshold, anything with an inventory above 25, we go down to 232. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into this cell over here and I'm going to write in the value 25. Now the difference between a string cell reference and an integer cell reference is that we do not need to have these single quotes wrapped around our cell reference. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in that base syntax that we referenced before, which is a double quote and an ampersand. So we're going to do a double quote, we're going to do an ampersand, and now I'm just going to reference H2. And you'll notice that H2 is now being highlighted in a teal tint, and H2 is appearing in that same color. Remember, Google Sheets will always provide you visual stimulation, feedback, whatever, referencing what you're doing so that you can see what's going on. In line with that, you'll notice that the rest of our query here is colored in black, while all of these values up here within the actual query statement, our second argument is colored green, and then you'll see we have a second double quote down here, and then we have green coloration. The reason for that is because right now we have quote unquote concluded our query statement. There's a double quote here, there's a double quote here. Query believes that that is the end of the statement, the same way that our documentation only has two double quotes on the outside. So what we need to do is we need to add a second ampersand in there and then another double quote, which effectively continues our query statement. So what has effectively happened here is we have now maintained continuity of the query statement by leveraging these ampersands in tandem with our cell reference. So when I hit enter, you'll see that we have no disruption in here. And now we can type in any value we want. You can see I'm changing it from 15 to 12 to 3, and now we're back to that original 288 number. And when we put in 0, we have 288. If we go to 5, we still have it. 10, we still have it. 15, we start to get some changes, right? Once we get to 15, we start to see that we lose values from the data set. So to dive in deeper here, ampersands are one way that you can concatenate values within Google Sheets. I'll have another video talking about all of the join, concatenate, ampersand options that you have available to you. But for the purposes of query, you need to construct some mechanism in order to break and then rejoin the query. Cell references are not native to the query syntax within Google Sheets. You have to go outside of the query in order to reference something, and whatever you're referencing needs to align with the logic of the query statement. So when we use this cell reference here, it's the identical instance as just writing in a 15 here. The program doesn't really notice that there's any difference between those two things because it's logically sound. So when you're thinking about using a name such as United States or column 2 in our data set with people names, you need to wrap your ampersand and double quote with a single quote. But if you're referencing a number, you do not have to do that. If we started moving into dates, we are going to start to have some more dynamic issues that align with it. So for our purposes, I'm going to say and C is equal to date, single quote, year, month, day. And I'm going to hit enter. And now you can see that we are only looking at values that appear in October of 2022 that are from the United States and have an inventory threshold above 15. As you'll recall from some of our other videos, there's one specifically about dates. Dates are very challenging. They are dynamic, and the syntax within Google Sheets query is you need to reference the date in the year, month, day syntax. As we explore this, we might have some problems that we need to solve as we go along the way, but what we're going to attempt to do here is we're going to begin by referencing this date in cell H3, and then we will eventually construct a floor and ceiling paradigm that will enable us to have a start date and an end date. So we'll start, at one point, and then we will end a couple months after it. So what we're going to begin by doing is going over to start date here, and we are going to type in October 2022. And you'll notice up here that in the function bar, it is appearing as the month, day, year format, even though we see the text representation of October 2022 in cell H3. So what we're going to do is we are going to remove this date value in here. And you'll notice we have single quotes, so we're going to have to follow a similar paradigm as we do with our country clause, where we're referencing column A, and then we have a single quote, and then we're doing our cell reference. We're going to add in a double quote, an ampersand, and then we're going to go to cell H3. We're going to do an ampersand, and we're going to do a double quote. And you'll notice that we're getting an error message. And the reason for that error message is because we are currently passing in a date value. And you can see a sample of that in the text box below the query statement, where it's that big error message there that says unable to parse query string. We're going to hit enter just so that we can explore that, and then we're going to go over that solution again. You can see that it's populating a date value in here. Date value is a way that computers process dates sometimes, and query requires dates in the date clause of where to appear in the year, month, day formatting, similarly to how we originally wrote it. So I'm going to do Command Z, and then I'm going to go in. You can see we have it in that year, month, day formatting. But once we start doing our cell reference, it turns into a date value. So what we're going to do is we are going to just do a quick little demonstration again. This is also in the my date video. So you can see that, let me see if we can get this, date value, and then we do H3. Cool. So now you can see we're getting 44835. Over here, we're getting 44835. What we're going to do is we are going to wrap this in a text statement, and then we are going to format it as YYYY-MM-DD, double quote, enter. And now you can just see it appears in here as the year, month, day formatting that is required in this error message. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to add in a text function. I'm going to do a comma I'm going to do double quote. I'm going to do y dash dash dd double quote. Add the parentheses. And what I'm going to do, just so that you can see it a little bit more cleanly, is I am going to isolate the text function in here. And I'm going to also add an line break in here so that you can see this is where we're working with date, right? So just as a refresher, we need a single quote, a double quote, ampersand, and then we need to have text, have our H3 cell reference or whatever cell reference you're using. We use a comma, a double quote, and then we add in the formatting that is required for query. We add the ending parenthesis. We have an ampersand, a double quote, and a single quote. And now when we hit enter, we should get our results as we anticipated, right? We're getting, you see over here, we're getting 10/1/2022 as our min and 10/1/2022 as our max. And now if we wanted to, we could go over here and change this to December 2022. And now you can see those values are changing in line with that. We can go back in time if we want to. We can go to January 2021. That's awesome, right? So now we have this dynamic environment in here where if we wanted to, we could change it to Canada. I'm going to try and spell it right, and then we'll get it. And now you can see we're referencing Canada, and we could change the threshold to 25, and we could change the month to March of 21, and you can see all of that data is dynamically updating for us, which is wonderful. Cool. So now what we're going to do is we are going to add on some new logic in here with date so that we have an end date. And the end date that I want to work with is going to be, let's see, let's do May 2022. So you can see I enter that in there. It's currently not connected to our query statement in any capacity. But what we're going to do is we are going to hit enter, and we are going to change this statement in here. So instead of saying and C equals date, we're going to say and C is greater than or equal to date, because we want anything that is March and above, right? So if we just hit enter right now, what we should see is you can see we have our min month here where we're at March 2021, which aligns with our value in H3. If we just hit enter now, our max month should appear as 12/1/2022. So I'm going to hit enter and we're going to run that. So now you can see what's happening in here is when we change it from equals to is greater than or equals to, we get a more diverse range. So now what we're going to do is we are going to add one final clause to our where statement. We're going to say and C, and then we're going to add in less than or equal to date, and then we're going to do a single quote, a double quote, ampersand. We're going to do a line break again, and we're going to do text, and instead of doing H3, we're going to do H4. And then we're going to do our double quote, and we're going to go y dash dash dd double quote, end your parentheses. I'm going to do a line break. You don't have to. I'm going to do an ampersand, double quote, single quote, and we hit enter. And now you can see we have a dynamic threshold in here where if we wanted to, we could go to August 2022. And now we have a broader band that we're looking at. One consideration that I want to bring to your attention is that if you construct an environment like this, where you put a minimum and maximum date threshold, be prepared to augment that logic with some type of like a backup system. Because this opens up the potential where, let's say you have your beginning band at March of 2021, an individual might unexpectedly go into the end date field and enter in a date that is before it, right? So March comes after February. So if you put March 2021 as your start date and then February 2021 as your end date, guess what's going to happen? Your stuff is going to break. And you're going to get null values in here, and an end user, yourself included, might start scratching your head saying, what's going on in here? without realizing that you just made an unintentional mistake of putting in logic that could not compute. We will be discussing some of the ways that you can augment logic within Google Sheets, leveraging Google Apps Script in future videos. But to recap what we accomplished today is we learned about cell references. And cell references are when you have a value pointing to, or a value in a cell pointing to another cell in your workbook that provides an output. We used inputs from our sheet so that we or our end users could enter information that would then dynamically update our query without requiring them to go into the query. We learned how to use a cell reference with strings, which uses a single quote, a double quote, and an ampersand. We also learned how to use a cell reference for an integer, number, float, where you use double quote, ampersand. And then we discussed how to use dates, which have a similar method as strings, which requires single quote, double quote, and ampersand. Now, the one thing that we did not touch on today is what to do when you have a string with an apostrophe. So if it was Canada's, United States's, UK's, there is something else that you would have to do in here. I touch on that in other videos if you want to know about it, but it is something that you need to consider. One way to do it is to use 3 double quotes like this will maintain continuity. And if you anticipate that you're going to have a string that has apostrophes, like if you're working with, I don't know, like McDonald's or Wendy's or something like that, like if you're doing a business analysis of them, my recommendation to you is forgo the single quotes and just do 3 consecutive double quotes, ampersand, cell reference, ampersand, 3 consecutive double quotes. Cool. I hope you found this helpful. I have other videos on my channel that may be of interest to you. I hope you'll check them out. I'm always interested in feedback, so feel free to use that comment section. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck on your data journey.